What's up guys, today I'm going to be going over my top 5 PvE weapon loadouts for the final shape. I usually like to make a video like this a few weeks into a DLC or a season once I play through all the content, kind of experienced all the weapons, all the builds, and just talking about the 5 loadouts I find myself using in the most amount of content on all 3 characters, and that is what this is going to be. So starting off, I actually have an honorable mention first. I couldn't narrow it down to 5, and the reason this is honorable mention is because it's really only for one character, and that's going to be Monte Carlo, the Indebted Kindness, then the Edge Transit or whatever heavy you want. I find myself using this weapon loadout all the time on Prismatic Titan. Most of the Prismatic Titan builds revolve around Thunderclap or Consecration, and to really take advantage of your melee on that character as often as possible, you definitely need a way to get your melee charge back, and that is where the Monte Carlo comes into play. And not only does Monte Carlo give you your melee back, it's just a great AR overall. And on this loadout on Titan, you can give yourself Radiant, like almost all Prismatic or Solar builds this season, very easily, making the Monte Carlo good for anti-barrier. The sidearm will be unstoppable. And finally, for overload, you could use a jolting or a suppressing grenade. But I want to find myself using that on Titan. That is why it doesn't crack the top 5. In number 5, I have the Mountaintop or the Call with the Sunshot or the Graviton Lance and whatever heavy you want, usually the Edge Transit once again. So this is like the old classic Sunshot or Graviton, and these 2 exotic primaries are still great. Sunshot cannot be beat, just still one of the greatest all-around weapons in the game, and pairing that with the Mountaintop with Recombination is great for doing a chunk of damage to high health targets, or pairing it with a Call for Unstoppable for champions works great. The Sunshot is overloaded this season. And then you have your heavy of choice, whether that be a sword for movement or a GL or rocket for DPS. Still one of the best builds in the game. It's just been around forever. Moving on to number 4, I have the No Hesitation, which I call the best primary of all time, and I still stand by that. This AR just does everything you'd ever want. It heals you and your allies, gives everyone a 10% buff that does stack, and with Incandescent in the right, it's still a great accurate weapon for you yourself. And what I find myself pairing the No Hesitation with is the Call or the Mountaintop once again. And then you have a free heavy exotic slot. And for general play, I find myself using the Microcosm, but you could use whatever you want if it was a boss fight in a raid or dungeon or whatever. And overall, this weapon loadout is even better on a Solar subclass with Benevolence and things like that. And then even stronger on Solar Warlock, where it is one of the best options in the game, and that is why it's number 4 on this list. Number 3 is the one I've been running a lot recently, and probably the most fun loadout overall in the final shape, and that revolves around the Ergo Sum. And you can use whatever Ergo Sum you want, but in this one in particular, I've been running the Arc Conductor on Caster, and pairing that with whatever primary you want, or the Call. I found myself using one of these strand primaries because they synergize so well with Prismatic. Usually the Breachlight right now, but there's a lot you could choose from. And finally, once again, free heavy slot, usually the Edge Transit or Eager Edge Sword for movement. But overall, with this weapon loadout, you have incredibly great accuracy with the Ergo Sum. That also does great damage to high health targets. The caster frames just output a lot of damage right now. And then for your boss damage, you have the Edge Transit. All around, easily the most fun weapon loadout right now. Then at number 2, I think some people would put this at number 1. I have it at number 2 because it's only going to be really impactful on one character, and that is the Call / whatever primary you want, paired with the Still Hunt Exotic Sniper, and finally an Apex Predator, a Edge Transit, or even an LMG for Actor, because the Still Hunt will pretty much just carry your DPS itself with Nighthawk on Hunter. And this loadout is probably the best overall for pure boss fights. If you're playing Hunter this season, you're almost automatically using this in any boss fight in the game. It is just that strong. And the only reason I have it at number 2, not number 1, is because it's only on one of the 3 characters. You could still use this on Warlock and Titan. It's just not as good, but obviously we had to throw this on the list because there's a good chance this might be the most used loadout of the final shape. And number 1, the reason I have this weapon loadout at number 1 is because I think it's the most universally good in any content, any character, any build. And that's going to be the Kvastov with the Indebted Kindness, and finally with the Edge Transit or whatever heavy you want. And I think the secondary slot will be changed out later this season with the new Solar Rocket Sidearm and eventually the Martyr's Retribution. Both of those I'd be using over the Indebted Kindness wherever I slap that in a build in this video. But overall, this weapon loadout is number one because the Kvastov is just so good at just everything. It's very plug and play, no setup, no build. Just simply use it and it will delete any ads in the game and any piece of content at any difficulty level. It will just be one of the best primaries in the game. Then you throw on a Rocket Stardom, everyone's favorite specials, and finally whatever head you want. I think of all the weapon loadouts from the final shape that are new, I think Kvastov has the power of Sunshot, where it'll just be a weapon a lot of people just throw on whenever they need an exotic primary, and will become like that new classic loadout where you just see a lot of people using it going forward, especially once the Solar Sidearm and the Martyrs come out. You're going to be really looking for a top slot exotic, and I think this will be by far the best pick. Anyways, I think that's going to be it for my top 5 weapon loadouts in the final shape. Let me know what weapon loadout you find yourself playing with the most. These are my 5. And I guess a little update on my channel. I'm going back to single uploads. I plan on uploading for quite some time still. But I decided to go back to singles, even though I could continue doing doubles, just because I think the eyes on Final Shape has already calmed down quite a bit. And that's due to multiple reasons. Not because the Final Shape is bad by any means. It's one of the best DLCs ever, if not the best. It's just that there's other games coming out. And the way Destiny's kind of built these days is you play it for a week or 2, maybe 3, then you kind of come back later on. So long story short, I'm going back to single uploads, and I plan to still be around for several weeks to come. Anyways, I think that's going to be it for the video. There might be a little bit of gameplay left because YouTube is YouTube. Like usual, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.